I'd been up since dawn, chopping veggies, seasoning the roast, and setting the table just right. Harper had been buzzing around too, excited to have her family here. It wasn't often we hosted, and I wanted to make it memorable, maybe even show them I wasn't just some quiet graphic designer who lucked into their daughter's life. The house smelled like garlic and rosemary, the kind of aroma that wraps around you and makes you hungry before you even sit down. I'd spent hours on it, visualizing their smiles, hoping Bruce, my father-in-law, might slap me on the back and say, "Nice job, Cole." I don't know why I believed that. Maybe I was naive. The doorbell rang, and Harper gripped my arm, her eyes bright. "They're here," she said. I felt a small jolt of anxiety mixed with pride. They came in loud, Bruce with his booming voice, Elaine with her pleasant giggle, Trevor cracking some joke about traffic, and Mia following after, quiet as always. I greeted them, shook hands, gave out beverages. Everything felt pleasant, like we were building something good. The table looked perfect. Plates stacked, napkins folded, the roast steaming in the center. I pulled out Harper's chair, then went to sit myself. That's when it happened. Bruce came, over quick as anything, and pulled my plate right out from under me. He slid it to Trevor, who smirked like it was a game they'd played 100 times. "You eat after the genuine men," Bruce remarked, his voice low and harsh, like he was declaring a fact. My hand froze halfway to the table. I blinked, assuming I'd misheard him. The room kept moving. Forks clinked. Elaine called for the salt, but I just sat there staring at the empty space where my plate had been. I looked at Harper. Her lips were tight, her eyes flickering to me, then away. "It's custom," she mumbled beneath her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. "Tradition." My chest clenched. I reached for the dish. Instinct, I think, but her palm brushed mine, a quick shake of her head stopping me cold. Trevor dug in, tearing into the roast I'd spent all day on, beaming like he'd won something. Bruce leaned back, arms crossed, watching me. Elaine didn't look up. Mia kept her eyes on her lap. I wanted to say something, anything. "Give me my food back. This is my house." But it sounded weak, even in my head. So I sat there, hands in my lap, heat rising in my cheeks. They ate, laughed, chatted about Bruce's past hunting expeditions while I waited, like some kid at the grown-ups table. After they were done, Bruce pushed the half-empty serving dish my way. "Go on," he said, like he was doing me a favor. I took it, loaded a new plate, and ate in silence. The meal tasted like ash. Harper wouldn't meet my eyes. I kept reliving it. His voice, that smirk, her whisper. Tradition. Was this how they saw me? Some guy who didn't count? I chewed slowly, every bite fueling something I couldn't quite name yet. Fury, definitely. But more than that, hurt, confusion. I'd cooked for them, opened my home, and they twisted it into this. I stared at Harper again, hoping, wanting something. A nod, a touch. But she just sipped her wine and smiled at her mom. The supper dragged on, their voices blurring into noise. I nodded when I had to, laughed when they expected it, but inside, I was someplace else. By the time they departed with their noisy goodbyes and half-hearted thanks, I was already thinking about what came next. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not like that. Not again. The dishes piled up in the sink, and Harper started cleaning while I stood there, still feeling the weight of that vacant chair at the table. "They liked the food," she said, like that made it all okay. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My head was spinning, replaying every second of that night. Bruce's words echoed. Real guys. What did that even mean? I'd worked hard, built a life, with Harper, paid for this house, this food. Wasn't that enough? I watched her scour a pan, her shoulders relaxed like nothing had happened. Maybe to her, it hadn't. Maybe this was just how it was with them, but it wasn't how it was with me. I dried my hands on a towel, slow, deliberate, and felt something settle inside me. Not loud. Not yet. Just a quiet promise. They'd see. They'd all see. I didn't know how, but I'd make sure of it. The next morning, that dinner still sat heavy in my chest. Harper was already in the kitchen, humming to herself, pouring coffee like it was any other Sunday. I paused in the doorway, watching her, waiting for her to say something. Something about last night. She didn't. She just handed me a mug and smiled, soft and easy, like nothing was wrong. "You okay?" she asked. It felt more like a check-in than a real question. I nodded, took the coffee, and sat at the table, the same seat where Bruce had made his point. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just thinking." She didn't push, didn't ask. What about? Maybe she didn't want to know. Maybe she already did. I sipped the coffee, letting the heat burn my tongue, and decided, right then, I wasn't going to let this fade into some embarrassing memory we'd all pretend didn't happen. They'd pushed me, and I was going to push back. I waited until Harper slipped out to run errands. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the tick of the clock. I pulled out my laptop, started creating invites, basic ones, nothing fancy, just a time, a date, a place. Next Saturday, 6 p.m., dinner in our apartment. I sent one to Bruce and Delane, one to Trevor and Mia. My fingers paused over the keys before I pushed submit, wondering if this was dumb, if I was making too much out of it. But then I remembered Trevor's smile, Bruce's voice, Harper's whisper, heritage, and I clicked done. No going back now. When Harper returned home, arms full of grocery bags, I helped her unpack and spoke as casually as I could. "I invited your folks around again next weekend." She froze, a jar of sauce in her palm. "And why?" I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the bread I was sliding into the pantry. "Simply to show we thank them, you know. Keep things good." She frowned like she wasn't sure she bought it, but she didn't protest. "Okay," she said finally and went back to putting items away. I could tell she was inquisitive, maybe even worried, but she let it drop. That was okay. She'd see soon enough. The week stretched out, leisurely and quick all at once. At work, I sketched logos and layouts, my hands moving on autopilot while my head was somewhere else. I caught myself staring at the computer, anticipating their reactions when they walked in next time. I wasn't simply preparing food, I was arranging a moment, something they wouldn't forget. At home, I started prepping. I picked a menu. Nothing. Too elegant, but solid. Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, a pie for dessert. Basic stuff. Stuff I could control. I didn't tell Harper the complete idea. She'd probably think I was crazy or tell me to let it go. But I couldn't. Every time I passed that dining room table, I saw my plate sliding away, heard Bruce's comments. Real men. I'd show them what it meant to me. By Friday, I had it all figured out. I'd gone to the store, bought everything. Fresh. Chicken still cold from the butcher, potatoes heavy in the sack. I spent that night marinating the meat, letting the spices soak in, my hands busy while my head raced. Harper watched me from the couch, her book open but her eyes on me. "You're truly into this," she said, partly teasing. I grinned, wiping my hands on a towel. "Got to make it good, right?" She smiled, and for a second it seemed natural, like we were just a couple getting ready for company. But I knew better. This wasn't about impressing them anymore. It was about taking something back. Something they didn't even realize they'd taken. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying it in my head, every step, every word I'd say. I wasn't mad. Not exactly, it was deeper than that. It was about respect, about my place in this house, in this family. Saturday morning. I was up early again, cleaning the kitchen, preparing the table, just like last time. Harper assisted, quieter than normal, like she could sense something brewing. "You sure about this?" she said once, her voice soft.